Hi, my name is Angela. I'm currently a third year student, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my experience during my second year of pharmacy school, or when I was a P2. I'm going to talk about the classes I took, kind of other things that I experienced, such as my electives, how much I worked, organizations, things like that. So if that's something you're interested in, then just keep on watching. So this was the hardest year of pharmacy school for me. It was so bad. I'll just be honest. It was bad as in it was really, really tough. But I'm going to go through kind of what I went through, what all of us classmates went through, and tell you why it was so difficult. But this one was rough. I'm glad I made it through. We all just kept saying, as long as we make it through this year, we'll be fine. And so that was definitely true. We're fine. So in the fall, I took medicinal chemistry. And if you watched the other video I posted about my first year, I started with medicinal biochemistry. But now we're getting more specifically into just like structures relating to medications and less about the biological systems in which they work. So it's chemistry, and it's specific to the structures of medications and how they can work in our bodies to produce therapeutic or negative effects. So that was the first medicinal chemistry class, and we mainly started with antibiotics. So in the spring, we had a therapy course on antibiotics and how to use them. So in the fall, we first started with just kind of what the antibiotics were, their structures, and we did talk about the mechanisms in bacteria and viruses and how the antibiotics target those. But medicinal chemistry was a big class, and it was a lot of work. We had a quiz once a week. It was a lot, but it was good. So then we took Pharmacology 3, our third course. This one was, as I said in the other video, I love pharmacology, and this was even better because we started with diabetes medications and all the different classes. If you know much about diabetes, there's a ton of classes, ton of medications, a lot of intricacies. And again, like with medicinal chemistry, this was good to have a pharmacology background in diabetes medications because in the spring we would be covering diabetes care. So really good setup, in my opinion, with that. But yeah, it was really, really nice. We had a really, really good teacher, so that was really nice too. Then we moved on to Kinetics, and Kinetics is not my favorite, but it was just basic pharmacokinetics and absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion. It was just kind of how, it was a mix of math and concepts, and I do better with concepts than I do with math, but it was, we also had a really good teacher for that class, and it was basically kind of how our bodies process medications, distribute them, all the different things I just mentioned. It was a good introductory course, and we had more later on about kinetics, but that was a good introductory course. Then we started in what I consider to be the heaviest part of P2 year, which was our pharmacotherapy courses. And we covered big things, big disease states that are so prevalent, so common, so definitely important. But we covered high blood pressure, hypertension, cholesterol, mental health, a lot of mental health, so depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, no, not Alzheimer's, but ADHD. So a lot of different stuff and a lot of really important stuff. So I enjoyed therapy, but it was a big shock. That was probably the biggest shock of the year because in our other first year, we never really learned anything to where it is something you're really going to have to sink in and know and use, all the time. So I kind of got really nervous as far as like, oh my gosh, if I don't remember these things and I'm learning now, I'll never be a good pharmacist. It was kind of just a really big, nerve-wracking time when you're kind of like really getting into the meat and bones of what you're going to be doing as a pharmacist. But it all went well, and it was still very, very interesting. So that was probably the biggest stressor, was those big disease states and starting to apply things in a very real way. But that was our therapy course for that year, kind of the things that we covered. Had great teachers in that class. Then we had a hospital and hospital class, I like to call it, just learning about the different institutional ways that pharmacy is involved with healthcare. So basically focusing on kind of how hospitals work and kind of all the different ways that pharmacists work there. So I had not had experience in a hospital setting, so it was very new to me, but that was kind of our easier course. We usually have one easier course every year to kind of give us a break, but still expose us to important things within pharmacy. We had our third skills lab, where it was also focused in hospital. So we learned about IVs, MedRec, a little bit more about NTM, but just kind of how formularies work there and substitutions. And again, I had not had experience with that, so very, very useful. And so we had more of a hospital focus, and in our first year we had more of a community or outpatient focus, and this was more hospital focus. This is when I took an elective for the first time. So I took an elective on diabetes because I was very interested in diabetes. And this one covered just different areas within diabetes. Basically, we had to all give a presentation each year. We each took turns giving a presentation over some topic. And I did non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and kind of was one of the first things that I looked into with diabetes and how common it is and things like that. So that was my elective and I really enjoyed it. And I felt like I learned it alongside the pharmacology, and so it was nice to kind of have a double dose of that diabetes knowledge. But it's a very good elective for that time. Kept me busy. So in all, I took 17 credit hours, and it's different in the fall for us than it is for it's different P2 year than it is for P1 year. Our classes are in the afternoon, so they're from 1 to 4, and that was really, really hard. I did not like afternoon classes. I'm always tired, and anyway, that was just a negative shift, so just something I wanted to mention. But we're going to move on. I still worked during my P2 year. I still worked this normal 10 to 12 hours once every third or fourth weekend, about 20 hours for the weekend. And this time I worked in the mornings, then I would go to school in the afternoons. So that was just another change. Otherwise, I would always work in the evenings. So you see a different crowd, you see a different type of community pharmacy even when you work in the mornings versus the evenings. So then in the spring, we did Medicinal Chemistry 2, and that was one of the most challenging courses as well, as and kind of up there with therapy, because we covered cancer medications, which was just really, really hard because there are a lot, and they all work by really, I guess not intuitive not intuitive mechanisms. So it was definitely a new area, and yeah, so that was a hard one, and we still had quizzes once a week, and it was just kind of always there. We had Pharmacology 4, which I'm not quite sure. We kind of learned a mix of things, I think. It was our last pharmacology class, but adrenals, maybe a little bit of women's health, I can't quite remember, but we had another pharmacology course. We had a course focused on drug delivery and pharmaceutics in the area of like biologics, and a lot of conceptual stuff. That was really, really, really tough. I've always struggled with kinetics, but this was very much into how we, how the body changes in regards to receiving different biologic medications, and just how drugs are delivered in the many forms, topical, IV. It was just tough. It was just a tough area, but it's very cool, very interesting. I'm not saying it's not, but when you have to get tested over it, it just kind of makes you, more nervous when you don't understand it, of course. But we had our third therapy course, and this is probably the most challenging part of P2 year for me, was this third therapy course, because we covered diabetes. And diabetes is a very large disease state and very important disease state. Having, taken pharmacology and taken the elective, it was easier, but it was still a lot, and the guidelines are kind of complex. So that was nice, though, because we had all been kind of waiting. All of us pharmacy students have been kind of waiting to get that training. So we got it, and that was great. And then for the rest of therapy, we focused on infectious diseases. And so antibiotic use, different infections, viral infections, and we learned all these different antibiotics and the spectrum of coverage that they had. And we had this big quiz where we had to memorize about 23, I think, drugs, and in 6 different types of organisms or different kind of bacteria. We had to know if it covered or if it didn't cover, and how it covered, and the little nuances. And it was so detailed and so crazy. And some people love infectious diseases. They love antibiotics. They love all that stuff. And I appreciated it and enjoyed it, but it was a struggle to understand how antibiotics are used in combination and just kind of in general. And there's a ton of different side effects. I think a couple of antibiotics that I was learning, they just had 8 different side effects you had to memorize, and they were all unique. And I don't know, it's a lot of memorization, but that was a big part of it, but definitely learned a lot. We had our 4th skills lab, which we still continued with hospital focus, but then we kind of moved on to more clinical training, so MTM, or medication therapy management. And that was really, really helpful, because with this third year, we're focusing on that even more now. I took another elective, and this one I took a little bit easier because I knew that infectious diseases was coming up, and I'd heard how hard it was. So I took an elective, but this one was it was about medications, but it was called Phyto medicinal agents. So specifically how natural and herbal and plant medications kind of come into play with therapies. So in our therapy 1 course in P1 year, we had covered herbals and supplements. And so like I said earlier, I'm just glad I waited to have that training before I was able to take this elective, because otherwise I wouldn't have had like the base knowledge of just kind of how herbals fit into evidence-based medicine and just also healthcare and treatments in general. So that was really nice to have a little bit easier class. I was able to kind of, we didn't have to do a presentation. It was like a midterm and a final. So I appreciated the fact that I was able to get into an elective that allowed me to kind of balance between my therapy course and that course. And if one class kind of had to suffer as far as studying went, it was okay because it was an easier course. So I took 16 credit hours for the spring semester. I already mentioned I kept working, and we had PM classes, And I joined more organizations. I stayed involved and I kept getting more involved. I accepted 2 more positions during my P2 year. And one was within the same organization, and the other was within a new organization. Like I said, I'm going to do other videos on those to go more into detail, but I got accepted into others, which would carry on into P3 year, having more responsibility. But what was really nice is I kept working, and now that we had therapy courses to which were more applicable to pharmacy, specifically what we would be doing, I was able to apply them in the work, and it felt like I was actually kind of learning what I needed to know. So it did have its anxieties, but it also had a lot of benefits because I now felt like I could really practice what I would be using. So very, very rewarding overall. P2 really made you feel like you were on the right track, or made you feel like the things you were learning were going to be used and really practical. So I love that. And we finally I was able to give flu shots for the actual flu season and give a ton of shots. And it was just, it was a crazy experience. A lot of kids too. Giving shots to kids is a totally other different experience. So it was a lot of studying, so it was very, very hard, and I really used flashcards all the time, Quizlet and just my own manual flashcards, because like I said, we had quizzes every week for that one class, and then tests and quizzes just constantly. You have to write a schedule, you have to keep on top of things and know what's coming up, otherwise it comes out of nowhere. And it's different than first year, where the things that come out of nowhere, maybe you can kind of cram or study last minute, even though I just never was that kind of person to study last minute. It never really worked for me. I never did well. People who do that, it was really a lot harder for them in P2 year to stay on top of things. So, but everything came out okay. It was a hard year, and like I said, it was one of the most rewarding years, at least so far. I know we only have 3 didactic coursework years, but it was really, really a good introduction into what we're going to be doing as pharmacists, and set us up really well for rotations. And I'll talk about rotations in other videos, but yeah, that kind of covers my second year experience. In another video, I'm going to go over my third year experience, and I'll link the first year experience down below. And that's all for this video. Thanks.